This episode is sponsored by The Power of You, a leadership resource for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and anyone intent on developing their leadership impact and supercharging their career. For more information, check the podcast webpage or show notes. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. When you think about life, and I'm going to be a little esoteric and philosophical here for just a minute, but when you think about life and everything that we experience in life, anything that you can touch, anything that you can see, anything that you can actually access and consume, that sort of thing, everything begins as an idea in one sense. Everything is an idea. And then the idea takes physical form. And when it takes physical form, that idea now becomes visible to others and it's objectified. It's out there. It's not in me any longer. It's now out there. And I start labeling it. And usually that labeling takes the tone of, well, that seems different than me in this way. There's a difference. That tree looks different than that tree. So we start sorting pretty early in our lives for differences. And a lot of it is very useful. I mean, I go to the grocery store. Yeah, I want to have labels and to kind of tell me, okay, where are things on the shelf? Okay, you go down that aisle, you're going to find the condiments. You go down that aisle, you're going to find the dog food. That way I don't have to just waste a lot of time rummaging around. So labels can be very useful. For human beings, when we label each other, things start to get a little squirrely. And that becomes somewhat problematic. I want to read a passage from a book that I think is going to be setting the stage for this conversation we're going to have today. This book is called The Great Human Rebrand. The author is Merry Carole Powers, and she is my guest today, and I'm going to bring her up in just a moment. But this passage, I was struck by this when I was reading the book. Quote, "What was once used to differentiate us into categories is now dividing us into camps. Angry, hurt, fed up, confused, worn out, flabbergasted camps. And all of those feelings, justified or not, are widening the divide and weakening our connection to the one thing that truly matters, each other." That quote kind of sets the stage for why I do this Soul of Business podcast. There's a unifying, connecting source to everything. And if we get divorced from it, and we get divorced from it by objectifying and othering, we get disconnected, and then life gets a little squirrely. It gets a little funky. It gets a little perturbing. So I wanted to have, when her publicist floated the idea of having her on the show, got a copy of the book. I looked at it and I went, oh my God, yes. I can't not have her on the show. This work is profound. She wrote the book 2 years ago. We're going to talk a little bit about the book. But more importantly, I want you, the listener, to get to know her. What she's bringing to the table, I think, is sorely needed. And it's easily digestible in the way that she's positioning it. So if you're looking to be more impactful in your life, as you're looking to be more impactful in your organization, you want to find ways to connect. And connection is everything at the end of the day. So Merry Carole Powers, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for that amazing red carpet up to the conversation.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And I meant that. I mean, this book is a really interesting read, number one. But number two, it's an easy read in the sense that it positions ideas, it positions challenges to thinking that kind of back me up a little bit. I kind of went, I hadn't thought about that way. So let me give you just the listener a little bit of Carole's background. I mean, she is a recognized expert in diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI. And I don't want to politicize this conversation in any way, shape, or form. I want to neutralize again, this is where labels get to be really interesting. Diversity, there are study after study after study after study after study that show the viability and the desirability of diversity in workplaces. Now, homogeneity does not work well. Now, you want a heterogeneous workforce that you can leverage all of these different points of view. The equity and inclusion piece, level playing fields to begin to work with here, which is not making everything the same for everybody. It's just leveling the playing field. And then the inclusion, which is around connection here. But I'm very interested in the conversation around diversity in particular. And Merry Carole was basically the creative director for sustainability, purpose, and DEI at Deloitte. And when you think about it, a big consulting firm like Deloitte, the diversity is a big deal. You've got folks doing work with all kinds of people all around the world that have different value structures, different cultural organizations that or cultures that inform the organizations. So you have to have a diverse workforce that can actually transact business in those domains. So that's enough of my soapbox here. The soul of business is what we call this show. And so the question I'm going to lead with here, Mary Carole, is when you hear the term the soul of business, what does that bring up for you?
So for me, when I was thinking about your show and researching your show, what was really interesting was to sort of delineate the soul of business for me. And the way that I understand it in my heart is that the brain of a business is its product. The heart of a business is its purpose. And the soul of a business is its people, bringing all sorts of different things together to create success.
And where does that lead to? I mean, you've got to, and we're going to talk about this actually a little bit more detail, but you founded a company called Unicorn Kreative. And unicorn, I like the name of the company. A unicorn is this unique magical animal, and it's unique. It's kind of like, shoot, every one of us is unique as a human being. But we don't find in organizations, and this is a gross generalization, but I think it's generally true, we don't find in organizations that the leadership is actually leveraging that uniqueness in any way that could be demonstrably differentiating.
True. We leave so much talent on the table in organizations for a couple of reasons, and a lot of it leads back to labels. We hire people according to labels, and that's okay. The start of DEI used, our identifying factors, our diversity identities. Those are the things that locked us out of opportunity. So rightfully, they are the keys to let us back in. But to stop there, when there is so much more to each of us beneath our identity, therein lies our individuality, right? Those essence of the human essence, our personal passions, our innate, talents, the things we were just naturally good at, our earned skills, our weird little quirks. All of these things come together to create what you said, an extraordinarily unique, unrepeatable person. We are all an extraordinary cocktail of ordinary things.
Say that again. I like that. We are all what?
An extraordinary cocktail of ordinary things.
An extraordinary cocktail of ordinary things.
Yes.
Extraordinary cocktail of ordinary things. There's a Chinese philosopher, a book over my shoulder here on this side, The Leadership Mindset Weekly. I do a mastermind program twice a year, and it runs for a year. And I've got little quotes that kind of head off each chapter of this book, and this book becomes kind of the curriculum. There's, I think, 5 primary colors, but the way that they get mixed, there's 5 primary notes. The way that they get mixed. Everybody knows these notes. They are, they're common, but how they come together, that's the difference that makes the difference. So how do you, from a leadership perspective, how do you actually, I love this cocktail idea.
Yeah.
How do you bring it together so that you've got this non-replicatable power in your organization? For me, that's when you tap into the soul of the business. That's what you're actually making possible.
Right. So I think as a leader, what you have to do first is look past the obvious, right? What's on a resume is what's going to get somebody in the door. Yeah. That's got nothing to do with who they really are and what they're really good at. And then step 2 is to help people see that in themselves, because we live in a culture that really rewards conformity. Be the same, walk this track, do this thing, or else, right? And none of us want the or else. So we are not encouraged to get to know ourselves very well. And as a result, we don't actually, as a race, probably know the vast majority of what we have to bring to the table, because it's been dismissed as not valuable, as not, viable for success, all of those things that we say when we walk these paths. So people put aside sometimes their passions. They'll say, it could be a love of music. Okay, maybe you're not going to be on stage in front of hundreds of millions of people, but what I know from that is you know how to harmonize. If you can harmonize on a guitar, you can probably harmonize in a boardroom. and figure out how to bring all the notes of opinions together. So you got to help people see and then repurpose.
The idea of knowing myself well, I think of the Oracle of Delphi, the inscription. And there is, actually the ruins in Delphi. There is the inscription there, know thyself kind of comes into play. And you made a comment just a moment ago that as a culture, and this is, I think, pervasive in just about every culture, fitting in is really the name of the game. How do I fit in? And oftentimes that comes at the expense of knowing myself well.
Right.
I'm not encouraged to do that, because if I knew myself well, I could make some different kinds of decisions that would probably not allow me to fit into the status quo.
Yeah. Yeah. Like one example of that, and I talk about this a bit in the book, is education. We are told you absolutely have to have this many degrees of education to succeed. Well, by whose standards? Like, what if I actually want to be a welder? That's a great, wonderful, noble job to have.
Yeah.
You can use that in a career. You can use that in art. There's so many ways to use that. Do I really need a master's to do that? And, you look at some of our great success stories in our culture, they didn't have the formal education. So I'm all for it if it's right for you. But to take the time to step back and decide what's right for you, but then you're a little bit of an outcast, right? And you're going to get questioned and you're going to get challenged, and that comes with the fear of being left out or ostracized, or, we use our weapons and our paths of conformity we really weaponize them. We weaponize this need to belong that human beings have.
Okay, this opens up a really interesting Pandora's box, I think, around social media. Yeah, fitting in. Yeah, how many followers do you have? Did it go viral? All of those sorts of things. And it's all organized around fitting in. Yeah, in a very significant way, which precludes, and I think of my granddaughters in this conversation here when they were much younger. The TikTok dances and all of the stuff. And it was delightful to watch them do some of that stuff, but I also saw them trying to mimic others and losing themselves in the process.
Right.
Now they're old enough now that they're actually beginning to reclaim some of that. But how does that show up in the workforce? And I want to just kind of take that as a seed doesn't get examined. Self-examination doesn't occur, and I carry that masking, that mimicking thing forward. In your work with Deloitte or with clients that you work with Unicorn Kreative, where does that show up, and how do you actually position leaders to deal with that?
First, so the leadership question is really important, because I don't believe leaders are trained to develop at the individual level. So let's create that. First of all, let's set everyone up for success. But if I, as a leader, am responsible for the well-being of my team and the advancement of my team, let's make sure I have the tools I need to do that. Right? So step training for the job description. That's a box, right? And it's okay. People need to do what they are hired to do, but it's not always enough, right? There's more. So to look at the person, so using diversity as our beginning thing, to click below the identity and into the individuality and see somebody's strengths, somebody's shortcomings. Everybody's got stuff holding them back, especially in business, because the way we are in the playground is the way we are in the boardroom. So those same things just come forward, right? So instead of just labeling someone as a toxic employee or labeling someone as, that's a low performer, maybe you just haven't found the place where they can shine. So to take that checkbox of, yes, we have representation, and turn that into a rabbit hole of recognition where you can dive in and really get to know someone and help them grow. I think helping someone understand their value, which is what we don't do in our culture. And that's getting to know yourself better. What do you have to bring to the table? And then helping them understand how to articulate that value.
That piece is interesting. How do they articulate it so that they can be heard and seen, so that then they can actually be able to access those skills and talents in an appropriate way?
Right. So this is really where I got so interested in the startup world, because I see a sorely lacking ability to speak, to understand your value and speak it to your market. You know your product. Like, these founders know their product like nobody's business, right? But your value isn't your product. Your value is what your product does for someone else. So the empathy and the compassion and the figuring out what someone's shopping for, not what you're selling. And then to articulate in their language, not your language. Those are not easy things to do. And so a lot of times, and those are two of the reasons startups fail. Lack of a clear value proposition and a confused market. It'll rob you of your market fit right away.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely will. Yeah. And it's impossible to differentiate in an effective
jargon
manner.
Yeah. I have a thing called the jargon jar. You got to put a certain amount of money in it every time I get too much jargon on your page. Yeah.
The jargon jar. Let's put that over here. What do we really mean by this? Yeah.
Yeah, right. How about human terms? How about things people understand? So, it's really important for a company because when we're talking about this idea, you said we all start as an idea and then we express that, right? Yeah. So self-expression, I think, is like the most basic and the most exalted thing about being on the planet, right? We came to share who we are. So you got to know that. You got to know how to talk about that. And then when you think about your career, whether it's your company, whether you're owning your company or owning your career, either way, that is something you're going to pour a vast majority of your life's energy into. So what an opportunity to express yourself.
Yeah. And, that whole notion of being able to express myself. Yeah, I joke about this a lot. I mean, the soul of business, the soul of anything, everything has a soul. And I don't mean this in a religious sense, once again. I mean this, there's a kernel of life that wants to be expressed and wants to be expressed fully. I look at an acorn and I mean, there is an oak tree in that acorn. You wouldn't know it by looking at the acorn. But if it's tendered well, if it's nurtured, that oak tree can find full expression, and it's magnificent when it comes out. Mm-hmm. We don't treat people that way in organizations. Again, we go back to form and fit. We want them to fit in our educational system. In my experience, an industrial revolution is when the typical education process actually got formulated and executed on. It was designed for, let's get these workers that will plug and play. We get these workers that know how to adhere to time, adhere to protocols, adhere to being told what to do, all of that sort of stuff. And that becomes part of the fuel for the Industrial Revolution was the workers, but the workers had to be controlled.
Homogenized.
And when you start putting controls on things, you start limiting creativity and expression. So I'm always fascinated by how consultants, I'm fascinated by how I work, but with Unicorn Kreative as a consulting firm, you have a formulaic approach. And I say formulaic, not cookie cutter it, but there's a way that you actually approach your work with your clients that when we were talking earlier was, to me, I thought was very intriguing. And it's a 3-formula approach, if I've understood it correctly here. Can you talk about that a little bit and then maybe give an anecdote about how that has actually transpired when you actually applied it?
Sure. Yeah. So 3-pronged approach. 1, know who you are. I'm going to keep it in human terms, right? Because it could be for a person or a company, but know who you are. And that is like the value you bring. So we talked a little bit about this. Get clear about who needs what you have. And then guess what you get to be instead of a schmarmy salesperson? You get to be a generous human being, right? You get to share what you have to offer. So that's number 1. Get clear on what it is. Find a way to talk about it that people can understand, that speaks their language, and that is unique. Because again, we're all individualized. So a lot of people will call that a brand. But I think brands are a little overwrought and overthought and can be like, I have so many professional friends that are going to kill me for saying that, but they cost too much and they don't always deliver. And it doesn't have to be, you just need your story. You need to know how to connect. Our stories connect us, right? And then the third thing that we do is we enable and we execute with our partners. So a lot of advisors will come in and be like, you should do this and, sprinkle all their little magic dust and then go away. Right? Not my problem. Yeah. And people are like, okay, great, but how do I do that? Because if I knew how to do that, I might not have needed you in the first place. And so we teach. We actually have, we sit down and we teach marketers and we teach salespeople to work together. So getting back to that, removing the label of sales and marketing and creating unity in a culture. Bringing everyone together under one set of metrics, one mission, one shared passion. It's not there. It's sorely lacking in the startup world. And so we create a singular culture from which a company can grow instead of a divided culture where everybody's responsible for a little part and the parts don't actually fit together to grow anything meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. So it kind of gives the lie to the notion that the sum is greater than the individual parts that make it up if it's not curated effectively. You end up actually getting less.
Right. It's so funny. Divisiveness in the startup world, really watched this for a few years before launching the company. Mm-hmm. I was like, people think they're cooperating, but they're really dividing. So one of my favorite examples, I think we were talking about this earlier, is MQLs and SQLs. We have our marketing qualified leads and our sales qualified leads. Now, this was designed to create a graceful handoff process and to keep things moving, with communication down the chain. But then we turned around and gave each of them 2 different sets of metrics for success. And and they really got wobbly, right? And so it created this like siloed performance mindset. Well, I got all the clicks. What's sales problem? And sales like, a click doesn't qualify anything. What's marketing's problem? And then everybody's quibbling and we think we're doing all the work and we think we're doing all the work. And meanwhile, you're just slowing your entire company down, and all of that potential of self-expression just sits, and all of the people you could help go unhelped.
Now that brings up an interesting question in my mind as you were talking. I just, some dots started connecting here. Yeah, you and I both do a fair amount of work with startups, embryonic firms that are actually, coming into being. Many with whom I work are over the initial revenue hump, so they are actually revenue positive. The question that begins then to occur is, how do I scale? Mm-hmm. How do we scale our business? And the typical way that I've seen leaders approach that is we just need to set bigger goals, start demanding more of our people. We need to increase productivity. And so all of those traditional sorts of levers start to get pushed and pulled. And what doesn't necessarily get addressed is the developmental question of the people in the organization. And what seems to be missing is the idea that we grow great companies by growing great people. And if you try to grow a great company through traditional levers without attending to growing great people, you're going to fall flat on your face.
You're going to start a revolving door, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Barry Posner, a researcher professor out at the University of California, did a study a number of years ago, and we were looking at the relationship between awareness, clarity of purpose, and its relationship correlation to commitment in an organizational context, commitment to whatever. And he marked it out, and I want to just check this out with you. He marked it out in 2 different domains. One was the organization is clear about their purpose. So they've done values work. They're clear about who they are as an organization. And the other set was people that are clear about who they are, what's important to them, their value set. If you had an organization that was clear, and then I'll just kind of very summarize this study. If you had an organization that was very clear about who they are, but they didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to people in the process here, the bump on commitment levels was pretty negligible between companies that weren't clear and companies that were clear. If the people weren't clear, there was no real shift in exhibited commitment level to the organization's undertakings. But if you brought people in that were clear about who they are, some very interesting things started to happen. They knew themselves well. So they were self-selecting organizations that seemed to match, from a values perspective, who they wanted to be playing with. So that was one piece. The other thing, when there was change going on, because the organization was also clear about who they were, there was resonance in that movement. And they could actually get buy-in a lot faster, and commitment as a consequence of buy-in a lot faster. So melding the self-awareness dynamic into play here had a very pragmatic outcome from an ROI perspective. And that's one of the ways that Barry actually measured commitment was the return on the investment of knowing ourselves well.
Yeah.
So with that kind of long-winded overview here, when you're working with leaders in organizations, this question of developing my people comes into play in a very interesting conversation, because it's not give them training in how to move from point A to point B, or how to actually here's the script for the sale, follow this script. A developmental question is a different kind of a question, and it requires personal touch.
An individualized understanding.
Individualized understanding, yeah. Yeah. And that individualized piece, when we're looking at it, where do labels come into play here, both in terms of service to or antithetical to actually being able to leverage that individual interaction?
I think in service to, labels work, again, like you want to know where you're going in the grocery store?
Yeah.
You want to know where someone wants to go in their career. Right? And so you use the label to understand. You want to be in this sort of a job, working with people, working as a sole contributor, whatever those things are, right? And then you got to look beyond the label, look beyond the identifier, right? And you go, like, if you break down what I call the 4 elements of individuality, we've got innate talent, we've got earned skills, we've got like unique personality quirks, and we've got driving passions, your values, right? If you look at innate skill or innate talents and earned skills, there's where you develop your hard skills. There's where you help people learn more of the on the job. When they can become great managers with those 2 things. When you look into personality, unique traits, and driving passions, there's your soft skills. There's where you can get more into creating leaders. And it takes all 4 of them, but you can, you can see the shortcomings that way too. Do they truly not understand how to do it? Or do they have this weird personality quirk where they're shy and they're afraid to assert themselves, right? If it's that, then you work with that and you may see a drastic change right away. So I think it's developing people for the people they are, which I know sounds like I can't bespoke every single development, every single personal development I do. But you are bespoking it because you're giving it to the person. And let's not just put them on the assembly line, right? Let's actually look at them and think mentorship. So that's one thing. And then the other way labels can hurt or help is in the way they stereotype what we bring to the job, what our skills are. So as a woman in business and as a woman who came up in a very male dominated industry,
yep,
branding and advertising was a thing, right? If you saw Mad Men, it was a thing from the beginning.
Hey, the Mad Men was what I was thinking of.
Oh yeah. People are like, was that off? I was like, it's a little exaggerated, but not too much.
Not too much.
No, so I take that in the book. I deconstruct the gender label because I lived it. And so I'm bringing that up because you can't apply this professionally. So I'll give just a simple example, a stereotype as a woman. You are nurturing. So you belong in the kitchen. You are emotional. So you don't belong in the boardroom. Okay, so if I am nurturing, you know what else that makes me? A great mentor. You name a company that doesn't need a mentor, right? If I am emotional, you know what else I am? Is passionate. You name an Olympic athlete that doesn't cry on that podium. I care. You want an employee who cares. Now, if that's out of balance, sure, that's a problem. Any characteristic out of balance is going to create issues. But if we can get beneath the stereotypes, and by the way, the book does this for men as well, because it's not just women. So it's all of our labels. So in back to your question of developing, if you dig beneath and you see what's really there, then you really know how to develop someone. And if what you want is to scale your business, right? Don't just dump more demands on people and expect don't ask for more without giving more, right? It's not that much. You want people to sell more? Don't just send them to YouTube to find a selling class. Teach them how to actively listen, because nothing's going to sell more than understanding what your customer needs, right? Teach them to talk about the value, because nothing's going to help somebody sell more than understanding you can help them succeed. So as examples, it's just not the way everyone's always done it. And people keep doing what's always been done, but it's not working. So I think that's the definition of insanity.
It is. That's the definition of insanity. Yeah. And in today's world, I mean, the pace of change is ever accelerating. And when the advent of AI, really is coming into play here. My experience is the problem with change is not so much the rapidity of change or change itself. It's the disruption to existing relationships that change causes. And relationships are organized by labels. all of a sudden, the question comes into play when I encounter a change, who am I? Where do I belong in relationship to that change? That gets perturbed. And all of a sudden I have to recalibrate. And now who do I interact with? If there's a label in the way, it can either draw me in or it can kind of block access.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I read a study one time that it's not, and this is up for debate, but it's not change that people fear, it's loss. It's what they're going to lose in the change. So it's kind of what you're saying, right? I'm going to lose this personal relationship. Or so you look at what you're afraid to lose and then you strategize. How do I keep it, grow it, strengthen it, whatever that is? And you kind of, get beyond the label. And I love the AI. Like, I'm not going to tell you I love what AI is doing to our world, but I love the conversations when you stop just spitting out the words AI everywhere. As I like to say, our world is AI AF, and it's like driving me crazy. But what AI is doing is like democratizing innovation.
Yep.
Right? And so if you are a startup that you used to, traditionally you'd get 12 months, 18 months of like competitive runway out of some new feature, you've now got like days to weeks, maybe just a weekend. Yeah. So what's going to give you your moat, right? What's going to give you that uncrossable thing? And we're going to go back to it's your value in the way you talk about it. Because what we like to say is build a castle in your customer's mind. What are you going to do to connect with them? Back to human connection. And not make them, but build a trust with them that no competition can take away trust and connection once built. Right? And that's human. So it's back to the human in the business, bringing the humanity on every front.
And that from a competitive advantage perspective, that uniqueness, for me, that is the soul of the business. That is non-replicatable if you can actually access it, tap into it, and actually organize around it. Not organize around business processes, but organize around the soul of your business, that value proposition that is unique, that idea that looking for full expression. In that acorn, there is an oak tree.
Yes. And it is your human expression, right? You're the founder, it's your expression, but then also you put it in the world and now it's your baby. Yes. I can hear you're back. Hi.
Okay. There we are. We had a little, I don't know, internet, speaking of AI and technology.
Yeah. You know what? We're just going to say it's such a high vibrational conversation
that we're just exceeding the bandwidth.
That's right. We're too hot to handle, man.
Where can people find out more about both Unicorn Kreative? And that's creative is spelled with a K, by the way. But, I'll put these in the show notes. But the website is what?
The website for Unicorn Kreative is unicorncreative.com, and it's Kreative.
Okay.
And they're easy to reach out there, easy to get in touch with us. A little bit of information about how we unify everyone into one story and one culture. And then for the book, the greathumanrebrand.com or merrycarole.com or merrycarolepowers.com. It all leads to one place. It's on Amazon too. So
yeah, that's on Amazon. You're on LinkedIn. So I'm assuming that people can follow you on LinkedIn and your social on Instagram and all of the regular culprits.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Unicorn Kreative is on LinkedIn, and we try to give out free insights, just things to help people grow on a weekly basis. So if there's a company or a startup or anyone who's looking just for a little insight to get over a hump and they're not sure, they're ready to engage, we try to be generous and give anywhere we can. So there's another thought.
Well, that leads me right to my closing thought here. Yeah. As we come to a close here, I just want to thank you, Merry Carole. I've loved this conversation. I was very much looking forward to having it. For those of you that weren't privy to the backstage stuff, we had a number of glitches getting launched here. So I'm very thrilled that we were able to just kind of carry this whole thing through. This was really nice. As always, folks, as we sign off here, find ways, nature works in a very interesting way. Nature is actually the only truly free markets economy that you're ever going to find. It's no artificial encumbrances typically. And nature works in a very unique fashion. It works through distribution. It doesn't work through accumulation. Everything in nature is in some way, shape, or form a source of distribution. So in your life, in your business, find ways to distribute. Don't be concerned with accumulating. Yeah, if you're distributing, give things away, give ideas away. Merry Carole's giving some stuff away on their website. I give stuff away on my website. There's a lot of information out there. This is how you end up succeeding, is being a center of distribution. in your life. So thank you for listening to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett, and I will catch you on the next episode. Take care.
Thank you so much.
This episode is sponsored by The Power of You, a leadership resource for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and anyone intent on developing their leadership impact and supercharging their career. For more information, check the podcast webpage or show notes. Hi, I'd like to ask you to do something for me if you wouldn't mind. If you like this episode, I'd like you to not only subscribe on your favorite site, but I'd also like you to give a rating. Ideally, a 5-star rating would be greatly appreciated. But I think more importantly also would be just some comments. That helps with the algorithm and it helps build the audience with this. And more than anything else, if you could invite somebody else to listen, just share this episode with a friend, with a colleague. And I'd like to see how we can grow the soul of business. I think it makes a difference. Thanks.